Hello and welcome to the How to Carnivore podcast. I'm your host, Simon Lewis, and you're tuning into the Plant-Free MD series with Dr. Anthony Chaffee. Dr. Chaffee is a surgeon, nutritional researcher, and former pro rugby player. He's been strict carnivore for 3 years and an on and off carnivore for more than 20. Dr. Chaffee looks and feels like a real-life superhero. If losing fat, building muscle, finding focus, and getting the most out of life is important to you, you're going to love the Plant-Free MD series.
Hey everyone, Simon Lewis here with the How to Carnivore podcast YouTube series, and we're back with Anthony Chaffee MD. And today's topic is bioavailability of nutrients. So you've probably seen on Instagram and other platforms where people have compared, say, spinach with a steak, and they've listed how many nutrients are actually in each. And it's really eye-opening to see how much easier it is to get key nutrients from animal products versus plant and vegetable products. We're going to dive into that a little deeper today. But first of all, welcome, Anthony.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too, mate. So I'm guessing you're not tucking into any pea protein.
No. Yeah, well, I mean, that was the whole agenda of things like game changers. You know, they try to make this scientifically looking, presentation that they tried to pass off as a documentary, basically talking about how great plant nutrition was, how toxic meat was. But of course, you still need protein, right? And so what are you going to do? Well, we have this very conveniently, we have this pea protein supplement right here, who the main producer, James Cameron, just happens to own $140 million worth.
What a coincidence.
Yeah, it's so nice that he just had it right there for you. You don't have to go anywhere. It's all set up. Yeah, that's the thing, think about this way. We put these plants and plant materials through so much rigorous extraction and processes. It's like a chemistry experiment or industrial sort of a process to extract these nutrients out of them. If we were designed to do that, if that was so good for us, our body would be able to do that just naturally. A cow can do that with grass. We can't. We can't do that with peas. We can't do that with soy. We can't do that with grass. So we can't do that with any of these sorts of things because we're not set up to do that. We don't have the biochemical physiological processes that are required to do that. So we know flat out that's not actually how we evolved. That's not actually what we're supposed to be doing. So it doesn't matter how many arguments they make. It doesn't matter how many studies that they put forward, all which were garbage, by the way. Very painful film to watch. Very, very painful.
I've never tried.
What the health? I mean, I was furious within 2 minutes of watching that. I was just making angry notes on my phone about sourcing things and putting links and everything like that, because I had a friend of mine like, oh, you should really watch this. You should really watch this. It'll change how you think. I'm like, probably not. But as soon as I got in it, I was just like, I was furious. And I was just making that copious notes, and I sent him like, you forced me to watch this nonsense. Now you have to read, the rebuttal on it. And if I can find that, I will maybe make an episode just going through.
Yeah, that would be hilarious. I'd like to read that.
So annoying. And so that's the thing. We it doesn't matter what their arguments are. We can't actually extract this stuff naturally, so it's not natural. It's just as simple as that. And so it doesn't matter what they say after that, because you can make a convincing argument, with a bunch of, crap, it's just a sales pitch, but that doesn't make any sense.
So just to sort of, get my bearings, sort of like I mentioned before, it's like if you compare a plant with animal and you're looking at, say, like the nutrient quality, generally you're going to need so much spinach to get anywhere near as much, say, like iron or protein as you could from just eating a bit of steak. But even if you do get those nutrients from the plants, are they equal to the equivalent amount of nutrients from meat?
No, not at all. No, they're different. They're completely different chemical compounds.
All right,
some of those
here we go.
chemical compounds are bioavailable and some aren't. Bioavailable meaning that we can digest and extract and utilize these things to the same degree. It's very, very different. Even like different ions, of iron will be more or less available to us. And these things are trapped in greater molecules as well. They just measure the gross amount of, say, iron or protein and so forth. They'll just measure the gross amount of these sorts of things and just say, okay, that's how much you have. And they'll just put that on the label, but that's not how much you'll actually be able to absorb. Very, very simple way of demonstrating this. Most chemistry classes will do this in high school and certainly in college in their lab classes. They take like some special K or cornflakes or some sort of cereal, Cheerios, and you crush it up, dissolve it in water, and then put a spinning magnet in there, stir it all up, take it out. The magnet is covered in iron filings, because that's the iron that's in cereal and a lot of processed food is actual iron filings. So that is not bioavailable.
What, like the metal?
The metal, the actual metal, right? So that when you look in there, it's like, oh, Special K has 100% of your daily requirement for iron. It's like, yeah, not as bar iron, like that's not really useful to us. So you swallow an ingot of iron, well, that's all the iron I need for the month. Yeah, it's not going to do anything for you. I mean, you'll be able to get a bit off of that. Yeah, because your stomach acid will sort of break it down a bit. Some people take this stuff with vitamin C and that will help. It's more acidic, and that's
complicates things really. Take
stuff. Well, but it's like it's not a natural process, you know, and so you're having to do something extra, which is not what nature does. Nature just happens. Nature is natural. Koalas aren't making chemistry experiments to try to extract nutrients
that we know of.
That we know of. That's true. It could be some sort of secret cabal of koalas and so forth. So yeah, these are completely different bioavailability, and we know in plants that these things are much less bioavailable than they would be in meat. Heme iron is much more bioavailable, and they people say, oh, it causes these sorts of problems, blah blah blah. There isn't a single piece of high-level evidence to even suggest that these things cause a problem. These epidemiological studies that are nonsense. There's nothing showing causation between ingestion of heme iron and any sort of problem. Animals around the world, including humans, eat and drink blood all the time. Genghis Khan and the Mongol horde, they were drinking horse blood. The Maasai in Africa are drinking blood. Okay, animals throughout, any animal that eats another animal, they're ingesting a lot of blood.
Wait, so are you saying that some people think drinking blood is bad for you? Is that kind of some of the vegan dogma that's out there?
I'm sure there are quite a lot of people that are appalled by the idea, but the people saying that heme iron is somehow bad for you is completely missing what's in front of you. But there's a lot of other things too. The way they measure protein, for instance, is very different. So when you're measuring protein in meat, you're generally pretty accurate. If you're saying there's 30 grams of protein in steak, that's probably 30 grams of protein. Because the way they do this is they actually measure, there's a difference between crude protein and actual protein. Crude protein is just measuring the amount of nitrogen that exists in a compound. So they'll grind up a bunch of wheat and they'll measure the amount of nitrogen that's in that, per unit.
Why would you use nitrogen as an indicator? I'm not sure how this works.
So protein amino acids, it has an amino group that has a nitrogen group in there as part of that, and that's a requisite part of being a protein, is this nitrogen group in there. And so what people do, because it's just, how do you separate out just normal nitrogen with actual protein amino acid nitrogen? It might be a bit difficult. Maybe they just don't care to do it. Maybe it's more expensive. But what they do is they just measure the total nitrogen, and they just assume that this is all from protein, which it is not. It absolutely is not. That's it. It's an assumption, but they know it's an inaccurate assumption. But people conflate this by saying that no, this is definitely, look at all the protein that's in there. But everybody in the industry knows that that's actually crude protein. They're not talking about real protein. And when you do this with animal meat and so forth, it's actually much more accurate, and much more of the nitrogen is in the form of an amino acid. So you're getting much less actual aminos and protein in this whatever soy drink than you actually think you are.
Right. Okay. So if it says 15 grams in the label, you're not actually, your body can't absorb 15 grams. And we're not sure if it's actually 15 grams of real protein. Am I right?
No, it was definitely not 15
Okay,
grams of real protein.
Okay. And then you definitely can't absorb all 15 because it's not.
Well, let's say there's, there's no way of telling how much of that is real protein and how much of that is just nitrogen. But, whatever amount is actual real protein, that's not going to necessarily be bioavailable protein. Let's take wheat, for example. 80% of the protein in wheat is gluten. Gluten is not able to be used by your body at all. You do not break this down. You do not break this into amino acids. You do not take this in as this composite amino acids and then use it as protein. It is not available at all. 80% of the protein in wheat, just off the top, is not usable.
Not available.
And the other 20%, is going to be of varying degrees of usable, but 80% just not. So let's say, you got 15 grams of crude protein, 10 of that is actual, amino acids. 2 of those are somewhat bioavailable. So you've gone, quite far down very quickly. Can you get enough protein? Yeah, sure. But you have to eat a lot more than you think you do. And again, the theme of my entire life here is that there are other things in plants that you don't want in your body. And so you're getting all of those things along with it. Some of those things would be, we touched on it before when we're talking in the plants are trying to kill you episode. They have protease inhibitors. A lot of these plants have protease inhibitors. So they actually stuff up your digestion. It's not just like when you get this nutrients in and that's it. No, plant does not want you to eat it. If you eat it, it dies. Okay. There's very, very strong survival mechanisms in nature. Protease inhibitors, they stop the breakdown of protein in your gut. So even the
minimal protein you're getting in.
Yeah, the small amount that's bioavailable. Now your body can't even actually access much of that either. So you get diminishing returns very, very, very quickly. And there's other things as well. There's other things that screw up with your digestion and slow down the degradation and absorption of nutrients. Protease inhibitors are just one of them. And
a theme that's sort of popping into my head just as we're talking about this is plants and wheat, soy, blah blah, as this real kind of emergency food of if there was absolutely nothing else available, you might be able to consume these plants and get enough nutrition to sort of just survive and just get by. And then you put that into the context of people living today, where we do have the means to get any food that we want. Why people would choose to eat these foods that have so little bioavailable nutrients, so that your body has to work so hard just to get by. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's certainly the case. Look, we're a robust species. We have the ability to survive on different sources. And we have an herbivorous past, and we have some holdover protections from that, but they're not great. And most plants on Earth are inedible and will cause extreme illness and even death. But some of these things we can eat, and certainly that would have conferred a survival mechanism to people throughout history. Not even that ancient, but people caught in a siege, and you just have a bunch of grain. You can survive on this for a time, but you're going to get sick. You're going to get malnourished, and different sorts of vitamin deficiencies. But we can survive anyway until we get to our preferred, proper, and optimal food source, which is meat, which people have known from time immemorial. This was very, very important. And there's different sort of historical records of people basically restricting meat and not allowing meat into the population that they were trying to suppress to keep them weak and docile. And easier to control. If you're just healthy and virile, the thought was that they were going to be more likely to try and buck the system. That
makes a lot of sense. And also with mental health as well, you can imagine if you're trying to invade someone, how easy would it be to get on top of the whole population if they start to doubt themselves and get angry and fatigued and all the bad things,
anxious and depressed.
Exactly. Terrified and all that stuff.
So we going back for a long time that people use, meat was the main food source,
Yeah.
but we supplemented them with other things. Generally, when people were poor, this is why fatty meat was called rich food, because wealthy people were the ones that could afford it more often than others. But that's why, this is very rich food. Oh, that was a something that was very special. And
it's now used in like a derogatory term.
It is,
which is frustrating. Like, oh, this meal is so rich. Yeah, it's delicious.
Yeah.
It's loaded with animal meat and fat.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. It used to be, people would say that, people that were wealthy would live longer and were healthier and so forth. It's like, part of that had to do with them not having to work in the coal mines without masks. But a lot of that had to do
breaking work.
Yeah, but a lot of that had to do with that they had access to better nutrition, and you're not going to break down and wear out as fast if you were getting the proper nutrition. And the rich people were able to do this. Meat was expensive. And this is why it was called rich food, especially the fatty food. The fatty meat was absolutely the most sought after. And now it's the most reviled. But that really needs to change. I mean, this isn't new stuff, as we've said before. This has been well known, well documented, well studied, well described in the scientific peer-reviewed literature going back, hundreds of years. This is a very, very important concept that we have had people paper over and subvert, and it's cost people their health, it's cost people their lives in a lot of cases, because they've died of heart disease, cancer, diabetes, strokes, autoimmune disorders, dementia and Alzheimer's. These are things that did not need to exist. Like these are all preventable. And as I said before, but I really, really feel these are not diseases. These are poisoning toxicities, and this is a poison response relationship. We get exposed to this toxin and we get a toxicity. But the best way of getting rid of that and overcoming that is not making some novel pill for $2 billion, but by removing the toxin. And then you don't have the exposure anymore, and it goes away. Now, maybe there's some medications that can help you,
speed it up,
get that stuff out of your system and protect your body while it's getting out of your system. But the only real cure for this is to stop the exposure in the first place.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, deficiencies as well, like toxicity and deficiency. Because with the Alzheimer's one, when we spoke about that, it was very much a sort of double-pronged attack of toxicity plus not enough cholesterol to help heal the brain.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's sort of how I phrase it is, that the modern chronic diseases are not diseases per se, but a combination of toxicities and malnutrition, toxic buildup of species inappropriate diet, and a lack of species specific nutrition, namely too many plants, not enough meat. And that's very clearly evident. And we've seen in the literature going back to the 1800s that if you just remove these toxins and then reintroduce optimal human, appropriate human nutrition, biologically appropriate species specific nutrition, which is meat, fatty meat, then you will reverse these issues, because they're not diseases, they're toxicities and malnutrition. And then, and again, then you're eating these sorts of things. Mostly it was because people were very poor and they knew they weren't getting the right nutrition. But we can see with the bioavailability, there's a huge lack of, even the nutrients that are there are not actually what you think they are. Now, these are missing copious amounts of nutrients you actually have to have: choline, carnitine, vitamin B12, D3, K2, K1, all the essential fatty acids, DHA, EPA, the 20 and 22 chain fatty acids, which just don't exist in plants, and we don't really make them ourselves. The list is so long of these nutrients that are just simply not available in plants or fungi. You cannot argue that this is our optimal diet. We can use this as a stopgap to not die, but that's it. That's really it, because you will cause yourself significant amount of harm. Even just fiber, we were talking about, people say, oh, fiber is so important. You have to have fiber. And I've had people ask me, can you please do, a video on fiber, talking about like, is this something that we need or don't need? You absolutely don't need this. You do not need this. Oh, but how are you going to go to the bathrooms? Like, how do 66% of all species of animals go to the bathroom? 66% of animals are carnivore. How do they go?
I remember you've really helped me understand what fiber actually is. And like one of the key things you said was that we can't actually absorb fiber.
Yeah.
And I just never thought about that before. But when you said that, I just sort of started thinking about fiber in a whole other way. And then you also drew a connection between fiber and basically being wood. It's just like that's what wood is. It's made up from fibrous plant. And so when you consume that fiber, you don't absorb it into your body. It just clogs up your system and scrapes the inner linings of your bowel and intestines. Like a block of wood.
Yeah, well, that was actually the argument in the 80s of why you should eat fibers, because
people still say it.
Yeah, you can't get any nutrition from it, and it fills you up. It's a bulk, and so it feels like you're full, and you're tricking your body into thinking that it's full, but actually you're getting like no nutrition. And that was a good thing for some reason. And at first it was talking about that. Well, this is a diet sort of thing. You want to lose weight. But now they're saying, no, this is an essential nutrient. You have to have this. Why would you have to have something that you can't absorb? Like you can't absorb it, you can't break it down, you can't do anything. It's just like, oh, but it fills up space, and it feels like you're full. It's like, why don't you just eat a plastic bag then? It's going to do the same thing. It's not available, it has no nutrients, and just
sawdust
eventually go through. Yeah, but the reason that you shouldn't eat fiber is the same reason you shouldn't eat a plastic bag. It has no nutrition, you can't break it down, and it causes harm. And that's what fiber does. And yet people don't think about that. They don't think about like, oh, would you eat a handful of sawdust? Like, well, obviously not. But that's actually what they put in processed foods to increase the fiber percentage or the fiber content. It's actual sawdust. So, trees are cellulose. That's what fiber is. And there's, soluble, insoluble fiber and so forth. But, that is actually what they add into foods, is this insoluble fiber in the form of sawdust. It's not good for you. We have, copious studies showing that this causes, microabrasions in your gut lining, increased mucus secretion, and, and dysregulation of your immune system, and is likely involved in autoimmune dysregulation as well. We rest people's bowels in medicine. They have surgery on their gut, or they have an appendicitis or a diverticulitis that we're treating conservatively with antibiotics. We say rest the bowel. Well, what does that mean? That means don't eat any fiber. Well, I thought fiber was good for you. I thought fiber did really nice things for your gut. And one fact, no, it doesn't. These are all suppositions. These are all claims that were never backed up.
So in that scenario, do they encourage the patients to fast, or do they encourage the patients to just not eat fiber?
Don't eat fiber. Yeah. So low residue diet, basically just no fiber.
But I mean, what plant foods don't have, forgive my ignorance, what plant foods would be low in fiber? Are they telling people to go carnivore, or what are they saying?
Well, no, I mean, that would be the obvious choice for me, but just like white bread, things like that.
Oh, just eat white bread.
Yeah, white bread and jam. Basically it's what it's
doing. Oh, sorry, I forgot about sugar. You're allowed to have sugar. That's all good. And fructose.
Yeah. It's just the fiber. Fiber is the bad one, but fiber also blocks the absorption of your nutrients, which was also an argument for this. It causes a physical barrier in between your enzymes, which are now blocked from the protease inhibitors, and the food that's you can get some nutrition out of. And so this includes meat. So it blocks that. The enzymes can't physically get to them to break them down. And then if they do, they're a physical barrier in between the nutrients and the borders of your intestine, the lumen of your intestine, to then absorb through that wall. And so you end up absorbing much, much less of the nutrients that you've eaten. So again, crude protein, bioavailability, a lot of these things are not inaccessible, like gluten, and there's protease inhibitors. Now you're eating fiber on top of that. Like the amount of nutrition that you're getting from this stuff is minuscule. And then that all goes into your colon, and then you have the gut bacteria going to town on them. And this is where people say like, oh my goodness, this is when you eat meat, then it gets into your large intestine, you get TMAO, and oh my goodness. It's not going to get there in the first place if you didn't eat fiber. You would liquefy and absorb it in your small intestine long before it ever got into your intestine. And also, the gut bacteria, your intestine are going to be very, very different if you're eating plants and fiber. And so who's to say they're even going to have the right gut bacteria to turn meat into TMAO if the meat was there, which it isn't.
Sorry, what's TMAO?
TMAO, it's the boogeyman of the day for meat eaters, where they say this has been associated with increased cardiac events and heart disease, so forth. It's this epidemiological garbage. There's no studies that show causation. There's no high level evidence showing that TMAO does anything harmful in your body. This is all correlative, associative sort of assumptions, and stuff with animal models as well that again aren't very strong. But there's also, I was talking to Professor Bart Kay as well. He was a professor, university professor for 26 years and done tons and tons and tons of research. He was one of the peer review bodies for all these sorts of things, and helped mentor 30 people getting their PhDs and doing their dissertations. This guy is a serious academic, and then just recently, in the last few years, left academia because he didn't have academic freedom. His deans were telling him, you can't say this, you can't teach this. He's like, the hell are you talking about? And so he just said, yeah, screw this. And now he's, reaching more people through his online platform, and actually being able to say what he wants to say and what he knows to be correct.
What was his name again? I'm just Googling.
Bart Kay, K-A-Y.
Cool.
Yeah, Professor Bart Kay. Yeah, really nice guy. Very, very knowledgeable. I've spoken to him a couple of times now. I've had an interview with him on his channel, and then I'll be putting one up on my channel as well. But I was talking to him the last time I was speaking with him. He was actually talking about how there are, different gut bacteria when you eat meat, and especially when you're eating keto and carnivore, that actually devour TMAO. So even if TMAO was a problem, when you're eating a lot of meat, especially when you're eating carnivore, first of all, the meat's not really getting to your colon in the first place, but you have bacteria in there that are now going to yum up a lot of that TMAO. So you may not even absorb any of this stuff, even if you were, creating it in the first place. So again, these things are not, there's no hard evidence to say that, meat even creates any amount of TMAO that you absorb. And there's no studies or no evidence to say that, or even suggest that TMAO once in your system is going to cause problems, which there's, again, no evidence to show that it does. So, the list goes on. And, they're talking about fiber, they say, oh, you have to have fiber. Dr. Lustig, who I love, by the way, absolutely just love everything that guy's done. He talks about how fiber actually, you still do need this. And he's talking about it from, actually, he was talking about, fructose, that fruit is okay because the fiber actually slows and prevents the absorption of a lot of that fructose. So he's even arguing again in that case of actually, hey, this stops you from absorbing nutrients. Well, it's stopping you from absorbing other nutrients as well, and you're still absorbing some of the fructose. So you're not going out unscathed. You're just getting less of it. And he's saying that this then takes that down into your gut and in your colon, and it gets eaten up there, and you don't absorb it. That's fine, but I guess that mitigates the effects of fructose if you're eating fruit with fiber. Obviously, fruit juice isn't going to protect you there. No. But he was saying in one of the talks I saw him give, which was an excellent talk, he was saying that fiber, you still need to eat fiber. It's not food for you, but it's food for your microbiome and your gut as well. But one of the main arguments as to why that is, and this wasn't Lustig's argument, he didn't really flesh that out on exactly what what the benefits of this was. But one of the arguments and suggestions is that fiber, you can break down a little bit of the fiber. You have some of these gut bacteria that sort of break it down, and you make butyrate. And butyrate it protects and nourishes your enterocytes, your colonic cells, so the cells in the lining of your gut. And obviously, when we had a 4-foot long cecum, which is now our appendix, just the size of your finger, that is where the stuff would pack in. It would be there longer, and it would just sit there, because fiber wasn't supposed to move quickly. Fiber was supposed to sit down and not move until you could break this down slowly over a long time and get these short chain fatty acids as a byproduct of the bacteria eating the fiber. That they're saying that you still do this to a small degree, because those bacteria are in there, we just don't have enough time to actually do anything real with it. And you'll get a bit of this butyrate, and butyrate's really good for your enterocytes. But what they fail to mention is that butyric acid is a ketone body, and when you're in ketosis, when you're on a carnivore diet, you're producing a lot of this. It's one of the most abundant ketone bodies that you produce, and so you're actually feeding your enterocytes and protecting them from the inside out, because this is in your bloodstream, and your intestines are very, very vascular. You're getting a lot of blood flow through there, and so you have no end of butyrate. Also, something I learned again from talking to Professor Kay, where do we get the name butter from? Butyrate, because there's actually a very, very high amount of butyrate in butter. So if you're eating butter, this is also feeding your intestine as well. So you really don't need fiber from any direction yet you look at it, and it causes harm, and it prevents you from absorbing nutrients. And maybe if you're eating a bunch of poisonous crap, that's a good idea, but I'm not, and so it's not benefiting me. It's going to cause harm for me. And think about this from an evolutionary standpoint. Why would that make sense? Why would we have a system of stopping our absorption? Most animals are starving to death and dying from this in the wild. It's kill or be killed out there. It's absolutely hard life. And why would you have a system that you made it harder on yourself to absorb nutrients? Most animals, they spend their life trying to get nutrients. And now we're trying to do things to screw up our absorption of nutrients.
Well, could it be, I'm just sort of, thinking out loud here, could it be that the fiber in whole fruit is blocking some of the most harmful anti-nutrients or poisons? I don't know, because otherwise, like you say, why would you eat something that's got a few nutrients, but then it's also got something that's blocking some of those nutrients?
I think that it's a fair assumption that if fiber is blocking out nutrients, it's also blocking out anti-nutrients just from that physical barrier effect.
Yeah.
But so I think this will again not, the lesser of two evils is not necessarily good. Right. So
exactly.
Just because you're eating something with fiber, and that fiber confers some sort of protection against the harmful components in there, that doesn't mean that that's still good. It's not doing it enough and providing any actual positive benefit. It's just less of a negative. I think this is more of a demonstration of why juicing vegetables and fruit are a really bad idea.
Yeah, totally.
That if you're going to eat this crap, that the fiber might actually be a bit beneficial, but fiber causes its own problems too.
Yeah. And it slows you down.
And it can causes actual physical damage to your gut lining, and causes huge blocks of wood to get stuck in your colon and get impacted, which is really not what you want. So there are different ways of eating plants that are less bad for you, but I have yet to see a strong case for them being good for you in any circumstance where you're not starving to death.
Okay. Let's talk about fat-soluble nutrients. This is a term that I've heard thrown around, and I kind of, instinctively assume that when you eat certain nutrients with fat, or certain nutrients that are in fat, they're more easily absorbed by us as humans. Can you am I on the right track there?
Yeah, well, some of these things get emulsified in fat. Some of them live in fat and will bind into fat. And so the main thing with fat soluble vitamins is that if you're only eating lean meat, you're not going to get the fat soluble vitamins that live in the meat. And so fat isn't just our most nutrient dense, caloric dense food source, but it also has very, very vital nutrients. Retinol and vitamin D and vitamin E and a lot of these other things that are fat soluble, and so they live in the fat, and you need to eat that part of the animal as well to get those vitamins. It's nice to get vitamin D from the sun. Vitamin D is absolutely required. This is a pro-hormone. It has hormonal effects in your body and is a precursor to other hormones in your body. This is vitally important. It's vitally important for your immune system as well. The CDC actually published a couple of papers looking at the coronavirus and vitamin D, and found that people above a certain level of vitamin D, serum vitamin D, basically it didn't have any long COVID sort of problems or long lasting effects from COVID. And then if it got, above a certain level, they didn't, the death rate from the coronavirus was essentially zero. And if you got above this other threshold, I think it was something like double that. You didn't even get long COVID. You didn't even get long-term consequences from the coronavirus as well. So vitamin D is a very, very important molecule. And we've been telling people as doctors and mostly the media, stay out of the sun, stay out of the sun. The sun's going to kill you. Oh goodness, you only need 15 minutes a day. And then that's not true. You need more than that. And everyone's maybe they're getting 15 minutes a day, but they're just dumping sunblock on themselves, which is actually quite harmful. There's tons of chemicals in there that you don't want. And also, people may be washing this stuff off. When you make vitamin D, it makes it on the surface of your skin, and then it actually has to get absorbed in. So if you wash yourself, take a shower, it actually washes that off. You don't absorb that. It takes, I think it's something like 6 hours from a study I read, I don't know, 15 years ago.
So is this even if you're not wearing sunscreen? You're just out in the sun?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it's created on the surface, and then it has to sort of soak into your body, and you can wash it off. And so you don't want to do that. So I think it takes something like 6 hours to completely absorb. So it's not cut and dry. Also SPF, just as an aside, the sunblock, anything over SPF 15 is you're getting diminishing returns, and you're actually getting a lot of harm. I did a post about this and talking about other things to do with sunscreen on my Instagram, but just briefly, when I was in medical school, the professor of dermatology just told us point blank that anything over SPF 15 was a really bad idea. It just didn't make any sense, because SPF 15 sunblock blocked 98.5% of the UV light. There's not too far to go from there. So you get up to SPF 30 and you're getting like 99%. And then SPF 50 is 99.3. And then 70 and 90 SPF, you're getting like 99.7%. You're getting not much bang for your buck, and you are using 5 or 6 times the amount of chemicals in that to get that very minuscule effect. And it's just sitting, and it soaks into your skin. This actually does harm you. These are not benign chemicals. These are chemicals. This is not something that you actually want on your body and in your system. They don't just sit harmlessly like a coat of wax on your skin. This soaks into your body, and you have effects from this. She also said that, just as an aside of an aside, that vitamin E, and I haven't seen any studies on this, this is purely just what we learned in class, that vitamin E is very good for your skin, very good for scarring, but you want to be careful with when you apply it, because if you go into the sun while the vitamin E is still on your skin, it can actually be mutated by the UV light, and can actually turn into a harmful substance that actually is, I think there's like a 20-fold association with skin cancer from topical vitamin E when they go into the sun, which, skin cancer rates, melanoma rates are way up, and sun exposure hours are way down. But most of these sunscreens put in tons of vitamin E. So maybe that's something that people should think about. But all I know is that I haven't seen any studies on that. That's just what I was taught in medical school from the professor of dermatology. But I've certainly, looked at things, and it's tocopherol, TOCOPHEROL, or tocopherol or tocopherol acetate is what you'll see on it. May say vitamin E as well, but that's what I look for. And if there's some sort of moisturizer or sunblock or whatever, I don't really use sunblock, but I for other people, if they're going to use it, I would always check that and see if there's a vitamin E or tocopherol acetate on there, and just say, hey, I would just avoid that if I were you. Just get one that doesn't have that if you really want to use it. But yeah, and so but vitamin D is very important, and so that's another reason why I don't use sunscreen. But also on Carnivore, you're just not sun sensitive. We talked about in the other podcasts about how harmful plants are, the plants are trying to kill you episode, that there are some of these things that are photosensitizers. There's a lot of things in plants and vegetables that actually cause you to be more sensitive to UV light and damages your skin more.
How about seed and vegetable oils? There's a lot of chat online about them sort of making you burn more easily from the sun. What are your thoughts there?
I think I haven't seen any sort of hard science or studies on that, but when you sort of just think about these things as a process, seed oils, they break down a lot of free radicals, especially when you cook with them, and that causes a lot of inflammatory dysfunction and damage to your body. And that's what sunburns are. And so if you have all these free radicals and inflammatory molecules in your body, because that's another problem with seed oils, is they have, some of these things have 300, 400, 600 times more omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids. And omega-6s break down into just known inflammatory compounds that we actually take, aspirin and Advil and, COX-1 and 2 inhibitors, to inhibit these specific molecules from causing inflammation in our body and pain and pathological inflammation. That's what those medicines do. They block the downstream products of omega-6. And so omega-6 and omega-3 are metabolized with the same enzyme in the body. And so when you have an abundance of omega-6s, it actually uses up all of that enzyme. And you're actually, even if you have some omega-3s, it doesn't really matter, because now the enzymes are all used up with the omega-6s. So you're really just not getting any of the end products that you really, really need from omega-3s. And so it could be that, because you have just a lot more inflammation and you have a lot more free radicals and oxidative stress. This is why we take antioxidants. It's for the oxidants, the reactive oxygen species and free radicals. You have a lot more of these in your body, you're going to be causing a lot more skin damage. And so if you get a burn or you get red, which is just blood, that's not actually indicating that you're going to peel or that you've done irreparable damage. It just means that, like, you've worked out, now your body's like, okay, we got to get blood here because we want to patch that up. If you have all this inflammation, if you have these photosensitizers, if you have more reactive oxygen species in your body, that damage is going to be worsened. And this is why sunburns hurt, is because of that inflammation. And the damage is going to be harder to repair. And so this is why sunburns hurt. The redness goes like, oh my God, that's going to really hurt. And you're in pain for days after this. And then it starts to die and peel after that. That's because it's been irreparable damage. I don't get that. People on Carnivore don't get that. We go in the sun as long as we want. I may get red. I may get like just dark red, lobster red. I was up in Carrigini, which is just gorgeous canyons up north in Western Australia. Just blazing sun. I didn't have a shirt on the entire time. I was bouncing around there in Exmouth for like 2 weeks, 10 days, 2 weeks. People thought I did not own a shirt, and I just want to get as much sun as possible. I was like brick red. And at the sort of end of this, I was on my last day, I was just leaving some of the pools in Carrigini, sort of natural waterfalls and little ponds and things like that people swim in. And I was walking up, this guy looks at me, he's like, your back is really red. And I was like, it'll be fine. And he's like, no, it's like, it's like really red. I was like, it'll be fine. Like it's, it'll be a tan, tomorrow. He's like, are you sure? And I just looked at my arm was like a lobster. And I just went, yep, like that. He visibly cringed. Like it doesn't hurt. It's fine. It's just red because the blood's there and it's healing it, but it's actually not damaged. And it just faded, and it just eventually after a few days, it turned into like, just a deep tan. If I really overdo it, I'll peel a bit, but I really have to overdo it and it still doesn't hurt. And it's just like a very, very, very mild thing. So, so I get a lot of sun, carnivores get a lot of sun in general, and it's safe to as well. You can overdo it though. You can overdo anything, but you can do a lot more than other people. So, to get back to where I started that, Inuits and people in the northern reaches, for 9 months out of the year, even in like Seattle and England and Melbourne or New Zealand, 9 months out of the year, there are simply not enough rays of light getting to you to get enough vitamin D from the sun. There just aren't. And so you have to get this from something else. Well, it exists in other animals in their fat. And so like the Inuit, would eat a lot of blubber and a lot of seal fat and whale fat. And they would, they would get all the vitamin D they need because there's an abundance of vitamin
D. That might be one of the reasons why we crave rich foods in winter. We want foods that are more high in fat because we're not getting that vitamin D from the sun.
Could exactly well be that case, and likely is because things taste better if we need the nutrients in them.
Totally, 100%.
Yeah, and so I mean, this is where you have late, pregnant women with pica, where they're so pica is just eating things that are just completely inappropriate to eat.
Yeah,
and they'll go out and they'll eat dirt because they're so iron deprived and they're so anemic. Right. And their body's saying like, look, your kid's going to die.
Go to stage.
You're going to die if you don't get iron in your body. And so they're eating dirt. Like, oh my God, it's so good. I have to eat. And, so, and then eventually it doesn't. And they just go, oh my God, what did I do?
My mouth's full of dirt.
But they need to do that. Yeah, exactly. And I honestly, I think about this sometimes. I really want to talk to one of these women who's unfortunately experienced that. I think, like, what did it taste like? Why did it taste so good? And because at the time it would taste good, but obviously other times it tastes like dirt. And but that's why. And so, I think you're onto something that you'll want more fatty foods, and butter is a great source of vitamin D that will, you'll need more of that because you're not getting the sun exposure.
Yeah, I love some. I love some butter. I add it to most things.
Yeah. So
what are you eating at the moment, Anthony? What are you enjoying eating?
So I'm still predominantly eating beef, and in that being ribeye. So I still do wet age the big cryovac packs of ribeye, Scotch fillet, and then cut them up into big thick steaks. They're usually about 2 pounds, around a kilo, and salt them, put them on racks, and dry them out and cook them up after they've aged a bit. And that's still mostly what I'm eating. I still eat ground beef as well. Maybe fry up some. Last night fried up some bacon until it was crispy, cut into little chunks, and then stir fried that into ground beef.
Yeah, beautiful.
Add a couple eggs on that with a bit of sour cream.
I eat that sort of meal all the time. That's what I've had for lunch. Yeah.
Well, eggs, it's good.
Ground mince, a bit of bacon. Yeah.
And that's the thing. People who are on a budget, that's a very, very good and affordable, nutritious meal.
Bacon's really affordable. So are eggs. So is ground beef.
Yeah. And but if it's very lean, as it's hard to get fatty ground beef mince in Australia and New Zealand and England. It's very, very lean here. Like
Mackenzie's Meats has it. We have it. It's 15% fat. It's really good.
Okay, so 15
not high enough for you, man.
15% fat is like the leanest it gets in America. Like that's like the leanest it gets. Maybe you can get 90% in some places, but usually like 85% lean.
Yeah, because we do 95%.
Yeah, that's just cardboard, man. it just tastes so bad.
All right. Add some butter, add some ghee, add some bacon fat.
Well, yeah, but you need to, yeah. And so, yeah, if you're getting these lean cases of mince, then yeah, you just add a bit of butter, add some tallow, ghee, or sour cream, every now and then, if people can handle it. Not everyone is okay with dairy, and that's fine. But I find that a bit of dairy as a condiment every now and then, I mean every few weeks or months, is fine. I definitely feel better without it, but I don't feel bad. I don't feel I don't have a bad reaction to it. I don't have autoimmune issues or other sort of issues that are more sensitive to those sorts of things. So I find that I can use that, on occasion, but I never eat it on its own. It's always a condiment to meat.
What about raw milk? What about raw milk for a treat?
Yeah, but I mean, it's a treat though.
Yeah.
And I still wouldn't just drink it on its own. Like if you had a glass of raw milk, and raw milk, of course, is a very different thing.
Yeah.
To pasteurize, homogenize milk. It's much more healthy, but it's, it has carbohydrates, and these can raise your insulin and will shut down your metabolism and do things that you don't want. It causes you to store fat as opposed to utilize fat in a healthy, productive manner. And it's, people like the Maasai, drink milk basically their whole life. It's a little different milk. I think their milk is like 8% milk fat, as opposed to ours is like around 3.5 to 4. But, it's, some people have issues with that. There's, different casein proteins, like, people are starting to hear more about A1 and A2 proteins in milk. A2 can cause a lot of inflammation. This is why people with autoimmune issues generally do have problems with dairy, or one of the reasons why people with autoimmune issues can have problems. A2 is better, but it's not perfect. It still causes inflammation. I think that historically, when someone lost their mother or their milk dried up and they had a breastfeeding infant, if they couldn't find a wet nurse, someone else who was also breastfeeding, that they could sort of add on and say, hey, can you breastfeed my child for me? They would, you couldn't give them cow's milk because the casein ratios was too much. It actually would kill the kid. They couldn't survive on that. But goat's milk apparently would work. So that was closer to human milk, was goat's milk. You have to deal with the taste, but it's a little closer.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't taste as good as breast milk.
Yeah, I wouldn't know. But
we all want to know.
Yeah. But there was just a total random thing. There was a Gordon Ramsay episode that was actually pretty funny, because he was talking to this guy in California. California is so fatty. They'll have so many fats. Oh yes, this is the new fat. This is the new superfood. This is the new thing. Yeah. Every week there's something different. And I knew that because I grew up in Southern California. And then when my best friend growing up moved to California, I was visiting him, and we're seeing all these sorts of things. I was sort of warning him, like, this is just a thing. This is what they do here. There's a new fat every week. Don't get caught up in it. And we saw this thing on Gordon Ramsay where one of these guys were talking about breast milk cappuccinos. And it was, I swear to God. And so I don't know who they were sourcing this stuff from.
That's the question.
Suspect as well. Someone who's selling this stuff. They've made some mistakes in their life, I would say. And maybe they're trying to make up for it now. And he was talking about how that you make a breast milk cappuccino. And he's like, oh yes, make this breast milk cappuccino. Like all the ladies after the Pilates classes will have a breast milk cappuccino. And so Gordon Ramsay was just like, he's like, oh, should I? Oh, okay. And he's trying to gear himself up to doing it. He's just sort of tastes a little bit of it. He's like, what's that? It's really sweet. And he says, oh yes, it's very sweet. And then it starts going off. And Ramsay's like, nope, can't do it. Too weird. No, can't do it. And he just like bolts out of there.
Ugh.
And
I couldn't do that particularly. Like a random person.
Yeah, but it was we ended up messing with this poor barista like that day, like down in Huntington Beach. My buddy Jonathan and his wife were in front of me, and they didn't know we were together. So he made his order and was standing over to the side. And then I went and just asked her, it was a complete dead face. It was like, hey, do you guys do breast milk cappuccinos? And she was like, what? And I was just like, and she was just looking around for someone to be laughing. And I was just like, so serious. She's like, well, I mean, if you have something, I mean, I could put it in. I was like, well, no, it's like, it's like the new superfood. It's like, obviously it's like, like milk is like human milk. So obviously it's like better. She's like, yeah, I mean, that makes sense, I guess. And then right then, like Jonathan, just like perfect, straight man on the comedy act, just looks over. He's like, oh yeah, I saw that on Gordon Ramsay. Yeah. Like, what the hell is going on? And she was so confused, this poor thing. And, then I told her, obviously I was joking. She's like, oh, thank God. She was so relieved by this, but yeah, it's so funny. And so, but yeah, you don't need milk. You don't need dairy. We're adult mammals, certainly need this early on. That is absolutely the appropriate food, but we don't need it. You get everything that you need from meat. If you want to use dairy sometimes as a condiment, that's fine, but it's not as good as meat. It's okay. I don't think that it's something that's really going to harm you unless you have a particular aversion to it, or it causes a problem with you. Like a lot of autoimmune sufferers have issues with dairy. But if you like it and you enjoy it and it's not causing you too big of a problem, then do what you want. But just remember that there is enough lactose in there to raise your blood sugar and to raise your insulin, which will derail your metabolic system and cause you to not process fat appropriately and process energy appropriately. And it will, it has a lot of nutrients, but it doesn't have all the nutrients. So it's not really a complete source of nutrition as well. Goat's milk might be closer, but it's not perfect. It's not ideal. And so, I always try to talk about things in the ideal metric, the optimal, what is optimal. And if people don't want to live optimally, if they want to do something else and they feel fine, it's not too much of a difference to them, that's totally fine. I'm not saying that you can't do this or you can't do that, or you shouldn't do this. Do whatever the hell you want. Like, I'm just trying to relay some arguments and data to suggest, so to see what I think is the optimal way of living, the optimal way of eating for optimal health and longevity. And people can use as much or as little of that as they want. I choose to be as optimal as I can be. Every now and then I'll sprinkle in a bit of dairy, just as a condiment, but it's really only as a condiment. And 99% of the time, I'm just eating beef.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. All right. Well, perhaps we wrap it up there in our chat about bioavailability of nutrients. So some of the key points are that you got to eat a shitload of fruit or vegetables to get the same amount of, say, protein and key nutrients as if you was eating meat. And even if it does say 15 grams of protein on the back of your soy milk or what have you, you're not going to absorb that as effectively as you are if you're getting it directly from meat and fat. Fat has a heap of nutrients in it. So that's something to sort of look out for and include. If you're just eating straight meat, you're totally missing out on vital nutrients that you need. So meat and fat is the key. You don't need fiber. Fiber either. You don't want fiber. Yeah. Fiber. It might make your gut swell and make you need to take a shit, but it's doing damage, and it's also blocking other nutrients. Anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, just what you're talking about with, you having to eat a lot of this stuff, think about costs as well. People say that it's very expensive to do a carnivore diet, and, it's expensive to do. You can make things as expensive or as affordable as you want for vegan, carnivore, omnivore, anything you want to do. There are expensive things and there are less expensive things. And some of those things are equivalent nutritionally. So like ground beef mince is equivalent nutrition to a fatty ribeye, essentially, as long as you're getting a similar fat and cholesterol content. So, getting your butcher to make fatty mince is going to cost you the same. A lot of butchers don't even charge for fat. I know a lot of butchers in America just say that they don't charge for fat because people don't want it. They're gonna, they're not really going to use it. They throw a lot of it out, and so, they don't charge for that. So it can actually be cheaper. And or you can buy Wagyu, dry aged ribeye. Yeah. And you could spend a fortune on that, but you don't have to, and you'll get just the same nutrition, just eating, eggs and ground beef. But think about how much plants you have to eat, just to get the same amount of nutrition on the label, which as we're talking about here has maybe, 10% of that being actually absorbed into your body, maybe more, but in the case of wheat, probably not. And so you're going to spend a lot more money. Now think about how much does a kilo or a pound of ground beef cost compared to a pound or a kilo of spinach. Spinach is not cheap. And it doesn't have all the nutrients you need. You are lacking nutrients. And how much more nutrition, better nutrition are you getting from a pound or a kilo of ground beef, than you are from spinach? And spinach goes bad, all these things. People talk about meat just going bad and just, dropping out. There's schools here in Australia saying, don't put meat in your child's lunch because by the time it gets, we have no refrigeration. So it could just be spoiled and rotten by the time, 3 hours later when they're eating lunch.
Well, that's an absolute load of shit, because
of course it is.
If we compare that to how you're aging your own steaks in your fridge. Yeah. Anthony wet ages them for 3 weeks and then puts them on the racks with salt for another up to 3 weeks, right? And that's food surviving in your fridge for 6 weeks. You get a pack of spinach and stick it in your fridge. After a week, it's just, it's dark green and it's lucky. Wet.
Yeah.
And it's yuck. So that's, that's a load of shit.
Yeah, it's disgusting. And so we have there were cases of pemmican, which is just dried meat mixed with rendered fat that the Native Americans used, and likely our ancestors were using for hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of years, with the big mammoths and preserving, mammoth carcasses and meat and so forth. They found, and people use this as iron rations, and all the great armies going back thousands of years was basically a version of pemmican and dried meat with fat. And so they found stashes of pemmican that the British colonial army was using in the Revolutionary War, in the 1780s. They found it 50 years after the war ended, and it was still good. It was like the day it was made. So this stuff actually lasts a very long time. I make a brisket, I don't put it in the fridge. I just leave it on the counter, and I'll just cut off chunks of this stuff. I like it better room temperature. I don't like it all cold and hard. It's easier.
Wait, so you'll pressure cook it first?
Well, I'll put it. For brisket, I'll smoke it or slow cook it.
Okay, so just have some.
Stuff is sterile at the end of that, right? It's just completely sterilized. It's been in the autoclave, and so there's not really much growing on it anyway. But obviously, things can be introduced from the environment. But it does not go bad. So I'll occasionally make a brisket for myself, and I'll just have it on the counter, and I'll eat this thing over the course of a week. It does not go bad.
Also, brisket's very affordable cut. Brisket, chuck steak, mince, sausages, if they're clean sausages and they don't have any filler, I think that's also a good option for people.
Got to be careful with those though. Most of them have fillers and starch and sugar,
preservatives, or some meal in there.
Yeah,
you can get super clean ones from some.
You can.
All these cuts are cheap, and like you were talking about before, a pound of ground mince might cost you $8 or something, but a non-super active person, male or female, that can be enough nutrition for a whole day. That's the difference. Anyway, we're probably preaching to the converted in terms of the people who listen to our stuff, but
well, it's also good to think about, especially for people to know that this isn't something that only people that are well off can do. It's not rich food anymore. In fact, a lot of the plant foods and acai berry bowls are way more expensive than just eating
zero nutrition.
Yeah, and a bunch of crap that you don't want, and and there's always chicken. Chicken's cheap as hell, and so is pork, and they're very nutritious. Beef is the best. I love beef. Grass-fed beef, if you can get it, if you have access to it and can afford it, is absolutely the best.
Number one.
But everything else is better than anything else that you will eat on earth.
Yeah, totally.
And so don't break the bank just chasing after, perfection when, you've got second best option on earth available for you for very, very cheap and very affordable.
On that, I heard someone talking about a study where they surveyed like 1,000 people, all from different levels of income, basically like demographics, to gauge their interest in eating organic and quality and highly nutritious food. And it's completely scattered across all income levels or whatever you call it, demographics. So it's not just, wealthy people who are really interested in this. Everyone is. There are people from every single class interested in this. So yeah, the points that you're making, I think, is so important.
Yeah. And this is the most important aspect of our lives, really, because this is what fuels our life. And, if you don't get that right, then everything else is going to be a lot harder as well. You're going to be sick. You're going to be tired. You're not going to develop properly. Your brain's not going to develop to its potential. It's not going to be as powerful. It's not going to be as large, and it's not going to run to its maximal capabilities when it has developed, and it's going to degrade, and you're going to die young, and you're going to lose your wits, and you're going to lose your capacity, your mental capacity. And that is probably the most frightening thing for most people, is losing our mental faculties. And it doesn't have to happen. It just doesn't have to happen. And it's something that you can do, that anyone can do. There is affordable meat. And again, when you compare a pound of spinach with a pound of even ribeye, the spinach is going to be comparable, and you're not going to get nearly the nutrition from the spinach as you will from the steak. It's just not even possible to consider that. And, as you say, you eat one big steak and that's it. That's all you eat. And, or, ribeye or ground beef, eggs, eggs are cheap. You get a lot of eggs for not that much, and you'll be fine, So it's definitely affordable. And it's in the long run, you're going to be saving a lot, and you're on medical bills and different health related problems down the road. And in the short term, you're going to be fueled to the best of your ability, to your best possible degree. And your brain's going to be working, your body's going to be working, you'll have better energy, you'll have better mental clarity, you'll have better disposition, you'll feel better, you'll feel happier, you'll feel more satisfied, you'll be able to handle more stressful situations without a concern. Some things really bother people, and used to really bother me. Now they just happen to be like, okay, we'll deal with it. That's like, who cares? And people were wondering, like, are you okay? Is this? And I'm like, yeah, it's just like, it's a thing. You just deal with it. Like it is what it is. Let's just do it. That's something that you find. You find that you're much better equipped to deal with life and to deal with the world at any stage in life. And it will absolutely pay dividends in the long run. And it can be cheap and affordable in the short run as well.
Awesome. So well said. I think that soundbite is exactly what we're about. And that's the whole point of what we're doing. So don't need to add a thing to that.
That's good.
All right, Anthony, thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Till next time.
Yeah, see you then, buddy.